Welcome to Biblical Psychology, the channel that combines psychological ideas with scripture to help you respond more effectively to the promises in the Bible with regards to mental health. And if this is the first time that you're joining us, you'll be very welcome to watch some of our previous episodes, particularly the first one that talks about the vision behind this channel. And if you've been tuning in on a fairly regular basis, you will know that a number of our former episodes have been focused on psychological conditions which have their roots in negative emotion. But now our latter episodes have been focusing on positive psychology, which is the discipline of psychological well-being. And what we're finding is that positive psychological well-being helps to prevent mental health conditions. And we've been using the PERMA model of happiness to help guide our discussions. And we're now focusing on how relationships can promote happiness. And over the next several weeks, we'll be looking at the different types of relationships. Last week we took a look at marriage, and today we're going to look at the relationship between parents and children. So I'm just going to start by looking at some perspectives from the Bible on this relationship, and then we're going to sort of dip into the positive psychology literature to help us understand how happiness and psychological well-being can be optimized in the parent and child dyad. So we're going to have a look at Ephesians 6 verse 1 to 3, and that states that children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long here on earth. And that is amazing, because what that's showing is that what a child's attitude toward their parent should be. And it should be an attitude of respect and honor, seeing their parent as their guide, because children do need parents to look after them and show them the difference between right and wrong. And what the Bible is saying is that children need to honor their parents, and that comes with a promise. And that we have the 10 commandments that's detailed in the Old Testament, and interestingly, honoring parents is the 5th commandment. And what the Bible is saying is that by honoring parents, that is a formula for doing well in life and living long. Now that is amazing, that really is. And those of us with a biblical worldview and who accept the scripture as truth would be excited to read that. And if we take a look at Colossians 3 verse 21, it gives some indication on the kind of dynamic that parents should have with their children. So it says, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. And although it's saying fathers, I believe it's referring to parents. So father and mother, not to provoke their children. And I suppose what that's getting at is for parents not to abuse their position of authority, but but to be reasonable in their care of their child. So it's showing there that not only do children have to have the right attitude towards their parents, but parents also need to adopt the appropriate approach to optimize their child's well-being and development. And Proverbs 22 verse 6 states, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Now that's fairly self-explanatory, and I think that we all identify with that, because if you think about it, many of the core values and attitudes that we have as adults, we often can trace it back to the way that we were parented. And what that scripture is saying is that how you would like the outcome of your children to be is closely linked to how they are parented. And within the field of positive psychology or psychology, there are models that clearly make this link between child rearing and outcome. And the first that I'd like to talk about is the attachment theory. And for those of you who've watched my episode on love, the emotion love, I go into a lot of detail about this theory, and I would suggest that if you're interested in knowing about it more, that you would actually refer back to that episode. But I'm just going to summarize how a child's attachment is closely linked to the outcome and the personality, if you like, of how an adult might present. So we talked about, so on your screen you'll come up with a diagram of attachment theory, and what this diagram details is the expressions of behavior in children that would highlight the nature of the attachment that they have formed to their primary caregivers. And the other side of the green arrow will highlight what outcome in adulthood that attachment style will create, and how the attachment styles that we adopt as adults is actually very closely linked to the attachment styles which we established as children. So according to this model, a secure attachment style is established in childhood is the attachment style that would be presented in adulthood. And from earlier on, as children, children who are securely attached to their parents, you will know this by the level of distress that they experience when their caregiver is not around. So a child might express distress when its mother leaves him. So for example, if dropped off at a nursery, often children might cry for a little while if their mum or dad is having to leave them. And when their parents suddenly reappear, then they're extremely happy to see them. And in this kind of attachment style, the child would have established a harmony and synchrony between itself and caregiver, and you have a caregiver who caters to the needs of the child in an appropriate manner. And you can expect that that child in adulthood would have this secure attachment as a good foundation to forming appropriate relationships in adulthood. And then we have avoidant attachment styles, and this kind of attachment style develops from the basis of having, a kind of insecure attachment to your caregiver. So in this model, the parent might sometimes meet the need of the child and at other times not, and the child learns that their attachment system is not secure, and children need to have their needs met by their primary caregivers, and if they're not, then the child finds alternative dysfunctional ways to have those needs met. And these kinds of children become vulnerable to mental health difficulties in later life. And what this model is saying is that such children might become very autonomous at a very young age, and perhaps display behaviours that one might think wouldn't be normal for a child at a certain age. And it takes them through adulthood because they learn that they can't rely on others, and they become rather emotionally detached in their relationships. And this is a recipe for disaster in adult relationships because, as you know, in adult relationships, one essential ingredient that fosters closeness is when there is a harmony between the individuals, and they can rely on one another to a degree to have their emotional needs met in that relationship. Whereas someone who's very dismissing wouldn't be able to pick up on certain cues in a relationship, and so miss out on the opportunity to strengthen the closeness between a potential partner. And then you've got the ambivalent and resistant attachment style, and a child who has this kind of attachment style might present as being a bit upset if the primary caregiver leaves, but they rather than seeking them out in their absence, they just don't explore or express very little exploration of the primary caregiver. And somebody who establishes this kind of attachment style in later life develops a fear of rejection from their partner, and it might not even be based on any reality, but it's just a perception that they formed about prospective relationships, and it might be that they might seek to avoid relationships even though internally they might have a need for a relationship, but this avoidance and internal need creates quite a conflict in them, and again that could leave an individual vulnerable to developing mental health difficulties. So that's just one model to help us understand that in order to support individuals to optimize their happiness, it really does start from the parent-child dyad, and parents have quite a responsibility to support their children to develop into happy individuals. So another model is that psychology has a lot to talk about in terms of parenting styles, and you'll see an illustration of the different parenting styles come up on the screen, and I'll just take you through them one by one. So the first is authoritarian parenting, and what that parenting is characterized by is there's a focus on obedience, and with having that focus, parents might be more inclined to focus on punishing the child. And what's very sort of difficult about this approach is that the parent doesn't understand the context of a child's behavior, and they interpret everything that the child does in terms of bad or good, and they might punish the bad. And it might be inappropriate to punish, because one needs to understand, well, why is the child behaving in a certain way? And then we've got authoritative. Sounds a bit similar, but it's quite different. It's authoritative parenting. And as you can see from the diagram, this kind of parenting is established when a parent is in tune with their child. So they're in tune with the child's stage of development and the child's needs. And the child who receives parenting from a parent such as this will have its response to its needs optimized, and that is very good for the child, because parents need to understand their children's needs in order to respond appropriately. So in this diagram, you could see that a mother is sitting next to her child, and she's responding to her child's need for attention and learning. And a parent will, such as this, would create a positive relationship between themselves and their children, and will enforce rules and boundaries for behavior which a child does need. And then we have permissive parenting, and this is a parenting style where a parent doesn't enforce rules. They just assume that kids will be kids, and the child just goes about doing their own thing, and don't learn about what could be right or wrong. And one can't really expect a child to know what's right or wrong, because when a child is young, they're still going through their development, and they learn by what they see around them, and they do need a framework to help them work out the realities of life, and parents are the best ones to help guide them through that. And then the fourth parenting style is referred to as an uninvolved parent. So this is someone who's just has their child in the house, but they're absolutely not engaged at all with what the child's needs are, but very focused on their own needs. And often to be a good parent, one has to really put the need of the child before their own, because a child depends upon its parents for its survival until it reaches that place where they can become independent. So in summary, I think what we've learned today is that a child needs to be trained in the appropriate way to support them being a happy child, which grows into a happy individual. And both the biblical perspective and psychology concur in that it all begins from the child receiving the appropriate parenting, guidance, and training. So that's all I would like to say today on the relationship between children and parents. And I hope that there was some nugget of information that you may have found useful to assist you in your parenting of your children. And don't forget to subscribe, because that way you'll be notified of all the future episodes coming up. Bye-bye.